He confronted 20 monsters to save the girl. Her mother's cry of gratitude shattered him. The sun was setting on Krill 9, casting long shadows over the jagged cliffs and barren valleys of the mining colony. The air was thin and sharp with a metallic taste, carrying the faint hum of machines and the occasional screech of alien predators from the distant canyons. The colony was quiet now, most workers resting after another long day extracting rare minerals that humans valued above all else. But not everyone was at ease. Rylan Voss, a veteran of the frontier, felt a tension in the air that even the strongest alarms could not signal. He had learned to read the planet like a map, and something tonight was wrong. Rylan walked along the edge of the colony, his armored boots crunching against the brittle gray soil. His exosuit, a sleek design of dark metal and reinforced plating, hugged his body, and the faint glow of its interface pulsed softly as he adjusted sensors and weapons. He had seen a lot in his life: raider attacks, collapsing tunnels, storms that could strip the skin from bone, but he had never encountered anything quite like what was about to happen. A sudden alarm shattered the calm. Not a typical system alert, but a sharp human sound, the kind of sound that made instincts flare. It was a voice calling for help, desperate, trembling, and unmistakably human. Rylan immediately recognized the tone, fear mixed with hope, fear stronger than hope. His trained eyes scanned the horizon, looking for the source. "Lyra," the voice screamed again, carried over the colony's comm network. "Help, please, someone help my daughter." Rylan's heart tightened, though he had trained himself to suppress emotions in combat. He knew the voice belonged to Myra, a single mother who worked in the mining operations. Her daughter, Lyra, had always been a bright, clever child, curious and fearless to a fault. Rylan had met her once, helping Myra fix a collapsed mining shaft. He remembered Lyra's wide eyes and quick smile, and now those eyes were in danger. He activated his suit's long-range sensors and traced the signal. It led to a region outside the colony perimeter, a jagged canyon the settlers had named the Shadowed Ravine. It was a place humans rarely ventured because of the rumors: creatures that moved too fast to see, predators that hunted in packs, and terrain that could swallow a man whole in seconds. And now, apparently, someone had taken Lyra there. Rylan didn't hesitate. He had faced dangers before, but nothing compelled him to action as this did. He grabbed his plasma rifle, checking the energy cells, and fastened a compact pulse blade to his belt. Every move was precise, practiced, and silent. The colony's lights dimmed behind him as he stepped into the darkness, the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. The journey to the Shadowed Ravine was treacherous. Krill 9 was unforgiving at night. Jagged rock formations jutted out of the ground, like the teeth of some massive creature waiting to crush anything foolish enough to tread its path. The fog rolled in thick and green, swirling unnaturally around Rylan's boots, making even familiar paths seem alien. He moved carefully, listening to the sounds of the night: distant howls, a flutter of wings, the crunch of rocks as unseen creatures moved just out of sight. As he entered the canyon, Rylan noticed signs of struggle. Scrapes on the rock walls, torn clothing fibers, and strange footprints that didn't match any known animal on Krill 9. He crouched and examined them carefully. The prints were large, with clawed appendages, and they moved in a coordinated pattern. Whoever or whatever had taken Lyra was intelligent, not random. Rylan's mind raced. 20 creatures. That number came from the pattern of tracks and the destruction of the area. They were not ordinary predators. These were monsters, genetically engineered, bred for hunting and killing humans. He had faced dangerous animals before, but nothing designed with a mind as cunning as a human's would be even more deadly. He pushed on, each step measured. His suit's sensors picked up heat signatures, faint but numerous. 20 distinct sources, moving together in calculated synchronization. Rylan's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the realization of what he faced. He could not wait for backup. The creatures were too fast, and Lyra had only moments before they would endanger her. He moved silently, using the terrain to his advantage. Narrow ledges forced the creatures to funnel, rocky outcrops offered cover, and small fissures provided escape paths. Rylan wasn't just a soldier, he was a tactician. He had to be. One misstep, one wrong move, and it would be over before it began. Suddenly, a movement caught his eye, a shadow flitting across the walls of the canyon. He raised his rifle and fired a precise shot. The plasma bolt hit a creature mid-leap, sending it crashing into the rocks. Its shriek echoed through the canyon, a sound that chilled even Ryland's seasoned bones. But he did not falter. Every shot, every maneuver was calculated. He began to understand the monster's behavior. They were coordinated, but they were not infallible. Hours passed in a blur of shadows, narrow escapes, and silent kills. Ryland felt exhaustion creeping into his muscles, but he forced himself onward. The thought of Lyra kept him moving when every instinct screamed for caution. Finally, he reached a cavern partially hidden by a curtain of luminescent moss. Inside, faint sounds of movement could be heard. Lyra's voice, faint but unmistakable, called out again. Ryland paused, catching his breath, scanning for traps. The monsters had made a lair of sorts, using the cavern's natural features to their advantage. Sharp stalactites hung from the ceiling, some rigged to fall at the slightest disturbance. Pools of toxic water reflected the dim light, ready to conceal predators lurking beneath. He had to act with absolute precision. He activated a small drone from his suit, sending it forward to scout. The video feed showed Lyra, frightened but unharmed for the moment, her eyes wide as she tried to hide behind the monsters. They were clustered around her, 20 in total, moving in patterns as if anticipating each other's moves. Ryland studied them carefully. Their movements were too perfect to be instinctual. They were intelligent, capable of learning from each attack. Ryland knew this would not be a fight won with brute force alone. He needed strategy, cunning, and timing. He observed the patterns, noting the intervals between their attacks, their reactions to environmental changes, and the slightest weaknesses in their formation. Then with calm determination he prepared to strike. He whispered a promise to himself, unheard over the roar of the canyon winds. He would not fail. Not now, not ever. Lyra's life depended on him, and he would face 20 monsters if that was what it took. He moved forward, careful, calculating, every sense alert. The night was alive with danger, but Ryland Voss was ready. Every hero has a moment that defines them, and this was his. The first step into the shadowed ravine was not just a physical step. It was a commitment to humanity itself. For even in the darkest, most hostile corners of the galaxy, there were those willing to stand against impossible odds. Ryland Voss was one of them, and he would prove that no monster, no matter how engineered or intelligent, could outmatch the courage, ingenuity, and determination of a human willing to protect what they loved. The shadows deepened, and the monsters sensed his presence. Their growls and hisses filled the cavern, an ominous symphony of predatory intelligence. But Ryland was not afraid. Fear was a tool, and he had learned to wield it as precisely as any weapon. Step by step, he advanced, each movement deliberate, each breath measured. He was the hunter now, and the hunted would soon learn that humanity was far more dangerous than they imagined. And somewhere in the dark, Lyra clutched a fragment of hope, unaware of the true scale of the battle that was about to unfold. Ryland tightened his grip on his rifle, adjusted his stance, and stepped into the heart of the monster's lair. There would be no retreat, no hesitation. Tonight, one man would face 20 engineered predators, and the night would remember the courage of humanity. The cavern was darker than Ryland had expected. The luminescent moss painted ghostly green patterns on jagged walls, and the shadows twisted unnaturally, making every corner a potential threat. He advanced slowly, each step measured, every sense alert. The monsters were aware of him. He could feel it. Their low growls vibrated through the ground, a warning that he was trespassing in their hunting ground. Ryland crouched behind a jagged rock formation, scanning the lair through his suit's interface. The drone feed confirmed 20 monsters, moving with frightening coordination. They were not mindless beasts. Their movements suggested intelligence and planning. They circled the girl Lyra, her small form huddled in the center. Her eyes widened as she saw the drone, a flicker of hope igniting despite her fear. Ryland studied the formation carefully. The monsters had created a perimeter, blocking any straightforward approach. They shifted constantly, adapting to the cavern's uneven terrain. One wrong step would trigger a lethal ambush. But he had learned long ago that monsters, no matter how smart, were predictable if you watched closely enough. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, one at a time. Ryland adjusted his suit, engaging the stealth field to reduce his heat signature. His first move had to be subtle, a distraction that would separate the monsters from one another. He scanned the cavern and spotted an overhanging rock ledge. With a careful toss, he triggered a small seismic charge to destabilize it. The ledge trembled, then fell with a thunderous crash. Dust and debris clouded the air, and several monsters turned toward the noise, breaking the perimeter. One of them lunged toward the disturbance, giving Rylan a narrow window. He fired a plasma shot, precise and controlled. The energy bolt hit the creature mid-leap, and it crashed into the rocks, screeching. The other monsters immediately adjusted, moving as one, but Rylan was ready. He had studied their pattern, anticipating each move. With careful steps, he maneuvered through the shadows, taking advantage of the momentary confusion. Another monster approached from the right. Rylan waited until it lunged, then struck with his pulse blade. The monster howled, thrashing violently before collapsing. Despite his success, Rylan felt the exhaustion creeping in. The air was thick with the stench of ozone and blood, and his muscles burned with exertion. Yet there was no time to pause. Every second counted. Lyra's life depended on him moving faster than they could react. The monsters regrouped, more cautious now, but not deterred. They began to anticipate his moves, adjusting their positions with an almost mechanical precision. Rylan realized that brute force alone would not work. He had to think like them to outsmart them to stay one step ahead. He noticed a narrow fissure leading deeper into the cavern. The monster's formation left a small gap, enough for him to slip through. He took the risk, sliding quietly into the crevice. One monster noticed the movement and charged. Rylan barely dodged, rolling over sharp rocks and firing his rifle in a controlled burst. The monster fell back, injured but alive, forcing it to retreat temporarily. Inside the fissure, the air was tighter, the shadows thicker. Rylan could hear Lyra's quiet whimpers. The girl had been brave so far, but even she could not withstand the fear for long. He whispered encouragement through his suit's comms. "I'm coming, Lyra. Stay strong. I've got you." The monsters were learning from each encounter. Their attacks were faster, more coordinated. One tried to flank him, circling silently, using the cavern walls for cover. Rylan anticipated the move, pivoting sharply and firing before it could strike. Another screech pierced the air as the creature hit the wall, dazed. He knew he couldn't let his guard down for even a second. Rylan began using the environment more strategically. Pools of toxic water, jagged stalactites, and loose rock formations became his weapons. He lured the monsters into narrow paths, forcing them to crush into each other or fall into natural traps. Every tactic drained him further, but also brought him closer to Lyra. The final stretch was the most dangerous. The cavern opened into a wider chamber, and the monsters' perimeter tightened again. 20 of them, eyes glowing, claws ready, waiting for him. Rylan's heart pounded, but he focused. He knew he could not face them head-on. Instead, he relied on precision, speed, and human ingenuity. He activated a small, remote-controlled device from his belt. It emitted a high-frequency pulse, disrupting the monsters' neural coordination briefly. Chaos erupted. A few monsters collided, others recoiled in confusion. Rylan seized the opportunity, moving swiftly, his pulse blade striking with lethal accuracy. He targeted the weaker ones first, then the more aggressive predators. One by one, the monsters fell, their strength formidable but not enough to match human strategy and determination. Hours seemed to pass in mere minutes as Rylan moved, fought, and outsmarted the monsters. Each victory was hard-earned, but he did not stop. He remembered every face in the colony, every life that depended on survival. Lyra's frightened eyes were a reminder that his fight was bigger than himself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, only a few monsters remained between him and the girl. They were the strongest, largest of the pack, but even they could be outmaneuvered. Rylan used the cavern's natural hazards to his advantage. He dodged a lunging attack, causing the creature to crash into a stalagmite. Another was pushed toward a toxic pool, and the acidic water sizzled as it struck. Lyra watched in awe and fear as Rylan fought. She wanted to help, but she knew she could not. Her trust in him, though, gave him strength. He felt her small hand squeeze his mind through the suit's comms, a comforting human connection in the midst of terror. The final monster, larger and faster than the rest, turned to face him. Its eyes glowed with unnatural intelligence, and its claws scraped the cavern floor. Rylan knew this was the true test. He had no backup, no room for error. Every move, every thought had to be perfect. He analyzed its movements, anticipating the attack. The creature lunged. Rylan rolled aside, slashing with his blade. The monster recoiled but recovered quickly. They circled each other, predator against human, instinct against strategy. The fight was brutal but controlled. Rylan feinted, dodged, and struck with precision. Finally, with a calculated thrust, he landed a decisive blow. The monster fell defeated. Silence returned to the cavern. Ryland's chest heaved, muscles trembling, but the danger was over. He rushed to Lyra, scooping her into his arms. She clung to him tightly, her small body shaking from fear and relief. "I knew you would come," she whispered. Ryland held her close, feeling the weight of exhaustion and victory. The monsters were gone, but the lesson was clear. Humans were unpredictable, resourceful, and resilient. 20 engineered predators had been no match for strategy, courage, and the determination to protect another. He began the long walk back to the colony, carrying Lyra, navigating the treacherous terrain with care. The journey was slow, each step a reminder of the battle they had survived. Lyra's small hand occasionally reached up to touch his face, grounding him, reminding him of why he had fought. As they neared the colony, distant lights flickered in the darkness. Mara's voice rose again, this time filled with hope. She had seen them returning, and her gratitude spilled over in cries that shook Ryland to his core. He had faced death and chaos, but her human emotion, raw, unfiltered, heartfelt, was more powerful than any weapon or strategy. Ryland handed Lyra over to her mother, who clutched her daughter with tears streaming down her face. Mara's gratitude, simple yet profound, shattered the hardened exterior Ryland had built over years of battles. He had faced monsters engineered to kill, survived against impossible odds, but it was the human connection that left the deepest mark. The colony's people gathered, witnessing the return of the girl and the survivor of the monster lair. Ryland did not speak much. He simply nodded, allowing his actions to speak for him. Humanity, in all its fragile appearance, had triumphed through courage, intelligence, and the unyielding drive to protect life. That night, as the colony settled, Ryland sat atop a cliff overlooking the valley. The monsters lay defeated, the lair silent, and the wind carried the faint cries of gratitude across the barren landscape. He knew more dangers would come, more engineered threats, but he also knew that humans would rise above them. Not through brute strength alone, but through adaptability, ingenuity, and the unbreakable will to fight for what mattered. Lyra slept safely in her mother's arms, unaware of the horrors she had narrowly escaped, but Ryland did not forget. Every scar, every drop of bloodshed, every precise calculation of the battle had proven a single truth. Humanity was unpredictable, resilient, and stronger than anyone, or anything, dared to imagine. And somewhere deep in the shadows of Krill 9, other predators waited, watching, learning. But they would soon discover the same truth that Ryland had proven. When humans fight to protect those they love, nothing can stand in their way. The sun had dipped low behind Krill 9's jagged horizon, leaving the colony bathed in a cold, silver twilight. The night air was sharp and thin, carrying with it the faint hum of machines still working, extracting the planet's rare minerals, indifferent to the human struggles taking place nearby. Ryland walked beside Mara and Lyra, who had been reunited, yet the weight of the battle still pressed heavily on him. Every step was a reminder of the chaos he had navigated, the monsters he had defeated, and the delicate line between survival and death. The colony had never seemed so alive. People emerged from the shelters, drawn by the rumors of the fight that had taken place beyond the perimeter. Mothers clutched their children tighter, miners paused mid-task, and guards adjusted their weapons, wary of the unknown. Whispers spread quickly, 20 engineered predators defeated by a single man. Humans, fragile in appearance but unyielding in spirit, had once again proven their worth. Ryland's body ached from the battle. His suit systems were strained, some plating dented, energy cores partially drained. His pulse blade bore nicks and scorches, evidence of the close encounters he had survived. He did not complain. Pain was irrelevant when a child's life had been at stake. Lyra's small hand had been his guide, her silent trust his motivation. Even now, watching her cling to her mother, a sense of profound responsibility settled over him. Mara's gratitude was overwhelming. She could barely form words, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you, I don't know how to repay you, I don't even know how to say it." Her eyes brimmed with tears. Ryland placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. He said nothing, letting his presence speak. Words were unnecessary, she understood, and that was enough. The colonists gathered around, curiosity and admiration mixing with awe. They had heard of humans performing extraordinary feats, but witnessing one firsthand left an impression no story could fully capture. Conversations hushed as Rylan approached. Children peeked from behind adults, whispering about the hero who had faced 20 monsters and returned alive. Rylan nodded at them, not out of pride, but out of acknowledgement. He knew their fascination was rooted in fear and hope intertwined. Humanity's capacity to endure, even in the most impossible situations, was something even the bravest colonists had yet to fully grasp. Rylan retreated slightly, allowing Mara and Lyra to take center stage. He needed to recover, but more importantly, he needed to reflect. Sitting on a jagged rock near the edge of the colony, he let his suit partially disengage its energy shields. The night around him was silent compared to the chaos of the canyon, yet it was not peaceful. The victory, while decisive, carried weight. He had faced 20 intelligent predators, each engineered to anticipate and counter human tactics. And yet, he had triumphed, not through sheer power alone, but through adaptability, creativity, and the singular drive to protect another human being. The canyon below still held remnants of the battle. Stalactites had fallen, pools of toxic water bubbled faintly, and the lifeless forms of the monsters lay scattered. Rylan studied them, noting the variations in their design. Some had been faster than expected, others stronger, but all shared the same flaw: they underestimated humans. They assumed fear, hesitation, and physical limitations would dominate strategy. They had not accounted for ingenuity, the ability to learn and adapt mid-conflict, or the relentless determination born of care for another. That was the difference. That was humanity. Rylan's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of steps behind him. He turned to see Mara approaching, Lyra asleep in her arms. She placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and firm. "I can't thank you enough," she said again, her voice low but full of emotion. "You saved my daughter. More than that, you reminded all of us why we fight to survive here." Rylan's eyes softened slightly, the armor of years of combat cracking under the weight of genuine human emotion. "I didn't do it for thanks," he replied quietly. "I did it because it had to be done, because someone had to stand when no one else could." His gaze shifted toward the canyon, toward the lingering danger. He knew other threats would come. Krill 9 was unforgiving, but for now the immediate danger had passed. As they walked back into the heart of the colony, Rylan noticed the subtle shifts in the people around him. Children spoke in hushed tones about courage and heroism. Adults exchanged glances that held both pride and relief. Even the guards, disciplined and wary by nature, seemed to stand taller, reminded that humans were capable of extraordinary feats when they refused to back down. That ripple of inspiration, he realized, might be the most important part of what had just happened. It wasn't just Lyra who had survived. Humanity had reminded itself of its own potential. In the communal hall, colonists began to gather. Mara placed Lyra in a safe corner, watching her daughter sleep. She returned to Rylan, her hands trembling slightly. "You didn't just save her life. You reminded us that humans are not weak, even in a place like this." Her words carried weight, reverence mingling with gratitude. Rylan nodded silently, accepting the sentiment without vanity. He had no illusions of heroism. Survival, protection, and strategy were his guides, and they had proven sufficient. Even as the colony celebrated quietly, Rylan's mind wandered. 20 monsters had been a formidable test, but what if there were more? What if the creators of these predators sought to refine them, improve their designs, or deploy them elsewhere? The thought was unsettling. He had survived, but the war for survival on Krill 9 was far from over. Humanity's ingenuity would always be tested. And yet he found a strange comfort in that. Challenges, no matter how deadly, were what defined humans. They adapted. They endured. They survived. Night deepened, and the colony's lights cast long reflections across metallic surfaces and rocky ground. Rylan stepped outside again, drawn to the cliffs overlooking the valley. He needed space to breathe, to contemplate the events. The wind was biting, carrying the faint scent of minerals and dust. He closed his eyes for a moment, recalling the fight in detail. The monsters' coordinated attacks, their intelligence, and the narrow margins between life and death. Every detail was a reminder of human resilience. A voice broke his reverie. "Rylan," Mara said softly, stepping beside him. "I know you've faced death before, but I've never seen someone like you. How did you do it?" He opened his eyes and studied the horizon. "It wasn't just me," he said quietly. "It was instinct, strategy, and a refusal to fail." I had to save her. Humans, we don't give up, not when there's someone to protect. His gaze met hers briefly, conveying both humility and certainty. Mara's eyes glistened with tears again. She placed a hand on his arm, a silent acknowledgement of what he had done. Your strength, it's more than physical, she said. It's something deeper. You remind us why we're here, why we fight, why we endure. Rylan nodded, though he felt the weight of exhaustion pressing on him. For hours he had moved through darkness, faced unimaginable threats, and relied solely on his human faculties, mind, body, and heart. The victories were not clean, the path not easy, but the result was undeniable. Lyra lived, the monsters were defeated, and humanity's resilience had once again been proven. As the night stretched on, he thought about the future. The colony needed more than fighters. It needed thinkers, strategists, and those willing to face danger without hesitation. He had proven a point, but it was only a beginning. Krill 9 would always challenge humans. It was a harsh, cruel place, but humans had something the monsters did not: unpredictability, creativity, and the will to protect life at all costs. He returned to the communal hall briefly, checking on Lyra. She slept soundly, her chest rising and falling, oblivious to the danger she had narrowly escaped. Mara sat nearby, watching over her daughter with vigilant eyes. Rylan felt a profound sense of satisfaction, not pride but understanding. Protecting life, standing against impossible odds, and surviving where others might not. This was the essence of humanity. Later, he stepped outside again, the vast valley stretching before him. Stars began to pierce the twilight, distant suns casting faint glimmers over the rocky terrain. The monsters had been engineered to kill, but humans had something stronger: resilience, ingenuity, and heart. The battle had proven that even against impossible odds, humans could prevail. Rylan allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a tired, thoughtful clarity. He had faced 20 monsters and survived. He had saved a life. But the true victory was the reminder that humans, fragile as they seemed, were capable of extraordinary acts when driven by courage and care. That lesson would linger not just for him, but for the entire colony. And somewhere in the shadows of Krill 9, the quiet hum of unknown threats continued. Other predators waited, perhaps more intelligent, more lethal. But Rylan knew this: humanity would endure. Humans would adapt, fight, and survive. No engineered creature, no impossible odds, no darkness could extinguish the will to protect what mattered most. The night carried on, serene yet alive with the echoes of a recent battle. The stars above shone as silent witnesses to humanity's triumph. Rylan stood alone for a moment, letting the weight of the experience settle. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but as long as humans refused to surrender, no challenge was insurmountable. He turned back toward the colony, ready to face whatever came next. For in a universe filled with monsters, cruelty, and chaos, humans remained a force unlike any other: unpredictable, unyielding, and undeniably extraordinary. The first light of Krill 9 twin suns barely touched the jagged horizon when Rylan awoke to the quiet stirrings of the colony. The air was thin, crisp, and carried a metallic scent that reminded him of yesterday's battle. Despite the lingering exhaustion in his muscles, he moved toward the center of the settlement. Mara and Lyra were already awake, sharing a brief meal, their expressions calm but alert. The events of the previous night had left a mark not just on him, but on everyone here. Word of Rylan's actions had spread fast. Colonists whispered in awe as he passed, their voices low but full of respect. It wasn't just that he had defeated 20 monsters, engineered predators designed to learn, adapt, and kill. It was the method he used: precision, planning, and courage. The entire colony now understood something vital. Humanity, fragile as it seemed in a hostile world, was capable of overcoming threats that appeared insurmountable. Rylan paused at the edge of the colony's communal hall, observing the subtle changes. Workers moved with a renewed purpose. Security teams coordinated more efficiently, and children who had previously cowered at the thought of the wilds now looked to him with awe. It was as if the fight had awakened a dormant confidence within them, a recognition that humans could thrive even against monstrous odds. Myra approached him quietly. "The council wants to speak with you," she said, her voice measured. "They say your actions were remarkable, but they also want your input on future defenses. They don't want this kind of threat to catch us off guard again." Rylan nodded. He knew the council was right. The monsters of the shadowed ravine were a warning, not an isolated incident. Whoever had engineered them could, and likely would, refine their designs, sending even deadlier creatures into the colonies. Survival depended on more than courage. It required planning, innovation, and the willingness to face the unknown without hesitation. He followed Mara to the council chambers, a simple structure reinforced with metal and energy shielding. Inside, council members sat in quiet discussion, their eyes wary but filled with admiration. The leader, a sharp-eyed woman named Tessa Rhine, gestured for Rylan to approach. "Rylan Voss," she began, her voice steady, "what you did yesterday was extraordinary, not just for Lyra and her mother, but for every person in this colony. You faced monsters no one thought possible to defeat alone. And yet here you are, alive, unbroken. We need to know how." Rylan considered his response carefully. "It wasn't luck," he said finally. "It was observation, adaptation, and persistence. The monsters were intelligent, they learned quickly, so I had to be faster, smarter, and more unpredictable. I relied on the environment, on strategy, and on every instinct I've honed over years. That's what humans do best. We think, we adapt, we endure." A murmur spread through the chamber. It wasn't often that someone spoke so plainly yet carried so much truth. Rylan continued, "This wasn't just about strength. The monsters underestimated the human will, the drive to protect others. That's what made the difference, and that's what will protect this colony in the future." Tessa nodded slowly. "Then you will help us. We need to prepare. Krill 9 is harsh, and we are not alone. If monsters like these exist here, others will too. Your experience, your methods, they must be shared. We need a plan." Rylan agreed. Over the next hours, he outlined strategies for the colony. Defensive perimeters, traps utilizing natural terrain, coordinated patrols, and contingency plans for various threat levels. He emphasized improvisation, teaching colonists how to think like the enemy without succumbing to fear. His approach was methodical yet inspiring. It wasn't just about defense, but about awakening confidence and resourcefulness in everyone. By midday, Rylan took a brief break. Myra and Lyra were nearby, the girl now running lightly across the yard, her laughter a small but profound reminder of why he fought. He watched her, feeling a swell of emotion. Saving Lyra had been more than a battle, it had been a declaration. Humans were capable of protecting what mattered most, regardless of the odds. That declaration extended beyond one child. It applied to every colonist, every human facing the dangers of the galaxy. Later, Rylan moved to inspect the shadowed ravine from a safe distance. He needed to understand the terrain better, to anticipate how future threats might approach. The canyon stretched endlessly, a network of shadows and jagged rock formations. Evidence of his previous battle, broken stalactites, scorched rock, and faint traces of movement, was scattered throughout. He studied every detail carefully, noting patterns, weak points, and potential hazards. It became clear that while the monsters were formidable, they had limitations. They relied on coordination, instinct, and speed. But humans had creativity, strategy, and unpredictability. Where the monsters learned from repetition, humans adapted with imagination. Where they attacked in patterns, humans created chaos. That difference, subtle yet profound, was what ensured survival. As he walked the rim of the ravine, he considered the broader implications. The creatures had been engineered, yes, but by whom? Corporate rivals. Alien collaborators. Someone had tested human resilience, and that knowledge posed a continuing threat. Preparing the colony meant not just surviving, but anticipating the enemy's moves, adapting in real time, and using every advantage humanity could muster. By evening, Rylan returned to the colony, his mind filled with plans and contingencies. He was joined by a small team of volunteers, colonists eager to learn, to stand against the unknown. Under his guidance, they began drilling exercises, practicing rapid maneuvers, environmental tactics, and coordinated defense. It was rigorous work, but Rylan saw determination in their eyes. Humanity's strength, he realized, was as much in training and preparation as it was in courage. The night brought a quiet calm. Lyra slept safely, Mara remained vigilant, and the colony settled into a tense but hopeful routine. Rylan stood at the edge of the settlement again, gazing at the stars-piercing Krill 9 dark sky. The battle had been won, but the war for survival was ongoing. He reflected on what he had learned. Monsters could be engineered, strategies could be calculated, but the human spirit, intelligent, adaptable, and courageous, was the ultimate weapon. A sudden noise drew his attention. Movement in the shadows, faint but deliberate. Ryland's instincts flared. He raised his rifle, scanning. Nothing moved, yet his senses told him the universe was still watching, testing, and waiting. This was the reality of life on Krill 9. Danger never truly ended, but humans, if willing to endure and innovate, could face it and survive. Ryland returned to the communal hall to oversee the final drills for the day. Colonists were exhausted, but their progress was evident. They moved with coordination, employing the strategies he had taught. Every action, from handling energy weapons to using terrain to their advantage, demonstrated growth. Humans were learning, adapting, and proving once again that they were unpredictable in the eyes of any adversary. As he stepped outside to finish the day, Mara joined him. "They look strong," she said, gesturing toward the practicing colonists. "Strong and ready." "They are," Ryland replied, eyes on the horizon. "They have to be. The galaxy is not forgiving, and if we are to survive here, we must be smarter, faster, and braver than anything that comes for us." Mara nodded. "You've given them hope, Ryland. Not just by fighting the monsters, but by showing them what humans are capable of." Ryland looked back toward the shadowed ravine. The memory of the fight lingered. 20 monsters, every move calculated, every tactic countered. He had survived because he refused to be predictable, because he refused to fail. That lesson, he hoped, would carry forward, embedded in the minds of the colonists. Humans were not weak. They were inventive, resilient, and capable of feats no engineered creature could anticipate. Night deepened once more, and the twin moons rose over Krill 9, bathing the colony in pale light. The monsters of the ravine were gone, their threat neutralized, yet the lesson endured. Humanity's ingenuity and courage had triumphed where sheer strength would have failed. The colony was stronger, wiser, and more prepared because of what had happened. And Ryland, despite his fatigue and the scars etched into both body and mind, felt a quiet pride, not for himself, but for the potential of the humans around him. As he finally retired for rest, the stars above Krill 9 twinkled like distant witnesses. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other dangers awaited, unknown and possibly deadly. Yet Ryland's thoughts were clear. Humans would endure, they would adapt. They would fight not just for survival, but for the lives of those they loved and the future of their kind. That was the essence of humanity. That was the ultimate triumph. And as Krill 9 cold wind swept across the cliffs and valleys, carrying the faint whispers of the past battle, one truth remained unshakable. Monsters, no matter how engineered, could never predict the ingenuity, courage, and unyielding spirit of a human willing to stand for. What mattered most? The sun barely rose above Krill 9 jagged peaks, casting the colony in long, pale shadows. The air was calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous nights. For the first time in days, the settlement felt at peace. Children ran along the pathways, laughter echoing across the metal and rock structures, while adults worked with a sense of purpose that went beyond simple survival. Every person knew that they had witnessed, and survived, something extraordinary. Ryland stood at the edge of the colony once more, his eyes scanning the valley and the shadowed ravine in the distance. The fight against the 20 monsters was over, but the memory of their intelligence, their coordination, and their sheer strength lingered. His body ached, muscles still tense from the relentless battle, but his mind was clear. Every scar, every decision, and every calculated move had proven something vital. Humanity could not be underestimated. The colony's leaders had gathered for a council meeting, and Ryland joined them, offering insights and strategies. The discussion was detailed, pragmatic, and focused on preparing for the threats that Krill 9 would inevitably continue to present. He outlined defensive perimeters, early warning systems, and rapid response teams, emphasizing flexibility and creativity in tactics. Every plan carried the core lesson from the fight. Humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and unstoppable when they refused to surrender. Mara and Lyra joined him briefly before the meeting, their presence a grounding reminder of why he fought. Lyra's eyes sparkled with curiosity, the fear of the previous ordeal slowly replaced by awe and admiration. "Will there be monsters again?" she asked softly, holding tightly to her mother's hand. Ryland crouched to meet her gaze. "Maybe," he said carefully, But humans, people like us, we have something the monsters never do. We can think, we can adapt, and we never give up when someone we care about is in danger. That's how we win. Lyra nodded, her small face serious, as if understanding more than her years should allow. She clutched his hand briefly before running off to join other children, laughing again. The day passed in preparation, training, and planning. Rylan moved among the colonists, teaching, advising, and observing. He was no longer just a warrior. He had become a teacher, a strategist, a symbol of what humans could achieve when faced with impossible odds. Each colonist who learned, each tactic refined, was a reminder that the colony was stronger now than ever before. As night fell, a sense of vigilance settled over the settlement. Rylan returned to the cliffs overlooking the shadowed ravine. The faint glow of the fallen monster's lair was still visible in the distance, a silent testament to human ingenuity. He thought about the creatures, engineered to hunt and kill, and realized that they represented more than a challenge. They represented the universe testing humanity's limits, and humanity had passed with remarkable success. Rylan's mind wandered to the future. The battle had been a single moment, yet its impact would ripple through the colony and beyond. Humans were not merely survivors on Krill 9, they were innovators, warriors, and protectors. The lesson of the fight, the way intelligence, courage, and determination could overcome superior force, would serve as guidance for generations. A sound drew his attention, footsteps approaching. Mara emerged from the settlement, her expression calm but intent. "Rylan," she said, "there's something I need to show you." She led him to a small communication terminal. Messages had been arriving from neighboring colonies, reports of unusual predator behavior, sightings of creatures unlike anything seen before, and alerts of systems being sabotaged in nearby mining operations. The situation was escalating. Rylan studied the reports carefully. The threats were real and growing, but he also saw an opportunity. Humanity's resilience, honed through countless conflicts and survival against impossible odds, could be applied on a larger scale. The colonies could coordinate, share strategies, and build a network of preparedness that no engineered monster could overcome. The fight for Krill 9 was only the beginning. It was a blueprint for human survival across the stars. That night, the colony gathered for a small celebration. It was simple, with meals shared, stories told, and laughter echoing across the settlement. Yet beneath the light-hearted atmosphere was a sense of profound respect for what had been achieved. Rylan, for the first time in days, allowed himself to relax, watching as the community he had helped protect flourished. Mara approached him, a quiet smile on her face. "You've changed something here," she said. "Not just by saving Lyra, but by showing everyone that humans are capable of more than they believe. Courage, intelligence, heart. You've reminded us that we can face the impossible and survive." Rylan nodded, his gaze distant. "It's not just me," he replied. "It's all of us. Humans have a strength that isn't always visible. It's in our ability to think, to adapt, to care about each other. That's what makes us unstoppable." Hours later, the colony settled into quiet. Rylan remained on the cliff, watching the twin moons rise over Krill 9. The monster's lair below was silent, but he knew the universe was vast and filled with unknown dangers. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. Humanity had survived. They had adapted. They had triumphed. And that, he realized, was the essence of their existence, resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Rylan's thoughts returned to the monsters he had fought. They were engineered to anticipate, to strike with precision, to exploit weaknesses. Yet they had failed against one man driven by determination and purpose. That was humanity's greatest weapon, unpredictability combined with courage and ingenuity. The galaxy might challenge them again, but humans would always rise to meet it. The following days brought a renewed focus to the colony. Defensive measures were strengthened, training became more rigorous, and communication networks expanded to neighboring settlements. Every colonist, inspired by Rylan's actions, embraced a sense of responsibility. They were no longer passive survivors. They were active protectors of their world, their people, and their future. Rylan continued his work, guiding patrols, improving strategies, and mentoring younger colonists. Lyra often watched him from a distance, her eyes wide with admiration. Each interaction reminded him that heroism was not about glory, but about the lives one protected and the example set for others. Humanity's triumph was not only in surviving the monsters, but in inspiring hope and resilience in every observer. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Myra and Lyra approached the cliffs. Lyra handed him a small drawing she had made, a picture of Rylan standing over the defeated monsters, smiling and victorious. "You saved me," she whispered. "You're a hero." Rylan accepted the drawing, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. He knelt to her level and spoke softly. "The monsters weren't the only challenge. The real victory is in the people we protect, the hope we give them, and the strength we show when it matters most. That's what makes humans extraordinary." Mara's eyes glistened with tears. She placed a hand on Rylan's shoulder. "You've shown all of us something we needed to remember. No matter how dangerous the universe gets, humans have something no monster, no machine, and no engineered creature can ever match. Heart, will, courage, and the refusal to give up." Rylan stood, looking once more over the settlement and the vast expanse beyond. Krill 9 was harsh and dangerous, yet it was home. And humans, with all their imperfections and limitations, were the strongest force in this corner of the galaxy. They were adaptable, resourceful, and fearless when it mattered most. That truth would guide them through the next challenge, and the one after that, across planets and stars unknown. As night deepened, Rylan finally allowed himself to rest. The colony was safe, Lyra was secure, and the people had learned a lesson in resilience that would endure for years. The monsters were gone, but humanity's victory was more than physical. It was a statement to the galaxy. Humans were capable of triumphs no engineered creature could predict or contain. Above, the stars shone brightly, silent witnesses to the courage and ingenuity of one man and the enduring spirit of an entire colony. Rylan closed his eyes, letting the cool night air wash over him, knowing that whatever came next, humanity would endure, adapt, and prevail. For no matter the monsters, no matter the odds, humans were extraordinary, relentless, inventive, and unbreakable. And in that quiet moment, Krill 9 was not just a harsh world filled with danger. It was a testament to human will, a place where courage and ingenuity could conquer even the most impossible threats. The future was uncertain, the galaxy wide and unpredictable, but one truth remained unshakable. Humanity would rise, and when it did, no force could stop it.